Okay, and welcome back. It's Monday, and it's a day for Uncle Gordy to come by and regale us with more tales from the God. What is it? The Twilight Zone, or worse? As you know, if you heard the last hour, the estimated Caravan. What a fun word that is, isn't it? Light and happy, and they used to use the word gay, but in a different meaning. Light and happy may swell to 10, 20, 30,000. This could be the ultimate showdown at the border. We'll find out. Campfire time. What are you doing rattling papers back there?
Oh, well, I'm generally, I'm usually cleaning the kitchen. I mean, there's nothing dramatic that goes on in the world here.
Oh, no.
In this case,
No.
putting away the awful cardboard, low carbohydrate bread that I eat as a type 2 Vietnam veteran diabetic.
God.
I was asked today why I don't comment about the Caravan, and there are sometimes there's just only about so much news I can handle at any given time without going into a meltdown.
Yeah.
Plus, whenever I hear about the Caravan, I keep remembering Alex Jones telling me that there were, this is about 2 years ago, 30,000 ISIS troops training just across the border.
Oh, God.
Waiting to come
Oh,
in.
God. Don't forget the
Now,
50,000 Chinese communist troops either.
And that and the 45,000 UN Nigerian troops that he said were in South Carolina. So I'm just careful about this stuff. I should probably follow the story and be, but increasingly, and it's just like everybody else here. I pick out only a few things that I'll deal with at a time. And I look at today, for instance. I run a news bureau, private intelligence organization. And about 7 months ago, I set up a news bureau inside Turkey. Now, a lot goes on in Turkey. They have a leader that I think is a bit of a megalomaniac, but well, if this is a key thing about the news bureau business, and it's one that I think matters to everybody a little bit. Because I had a news bureau in Turkey, I couldn't report anything honest or bad about Turkey.
That's funny. Yeah.
Because
you'd lose your news bureau. Mm-hmm.
Because I'd lose my. Oh, and if you think I'm kidding at all, not whatsoever.
That's funny.
So. Even I write for the Russian Academy of Science and their website. It's a journal called New Eastern Outlook, and the articles I write there are promoted by Jeff. But it gives me an opportunity. One of the reasons I enjoy doing this is because in every article I get to, in order to be published in Russia, you have to write things in an article that are of interest to the Russians. And inside the articles, I'm able to plant seeds of information that I want to be reached by. I want the Russian government to see. Now, we started just leaving the seeds of information in, and then eventually, if I write something I really want them to see, like, for instance, I want them really mad at somebody who's done something to make me mad, and I'm thinking, the Russians have got thousands of nuclear weapons and have a history of just butchering anybody that's bad to them. So why don't I just do this? I can pretty much find reasons why the Russians can hate some of the people I hate. So all I really have to do on those days is find something to write about that is of interest to me, that points out to the Russians how much these people hate the Russians.
Yeah.
Then I just call Gene Khrushchev up, have him print the article up, and drop it on the desk of the Russian foreign minister
Uh-huh.
or outside Putin's office where he works. And, you know, normally somebody wouldn't admit to being this manipulative and
Man, you need
underhanded.
some WD-40 in there.
Yeah, I'm opening doors and moving around. But the reason
Sound like Halloween.
I do this, you can just sit on the radio and confess to anything. And
Isn't
it
that the
hardly
truth?
even matters.
Yeah. Isn't
Yeah.
that the truth? Well,
Now, this most recent thing now, with the advent of what's going on in Turkey with the Saudi Arabians, the Turkish government sent me a 2-page letter telling me how angry they are at me because I am alleging that in 1915 they killed 2 million Armenians. Actually, they killed 2.5 million.
that's right.
And that I've accused them
Sounds
of,
like a Holocaust to me, Gordon.
and that it's called the Armenian Holocaust, and they killed pretty much every Armenian they could get their hands on. And then there's something that they have something to do with ISIS. And let me tell you what I got this something to do with. If we take the clock back to 2014, Russian aerospace forces were just becoming involved in Syria. And lo and behold, what they located. Now, they began flying over Syria, eastern Syria. In eastern Syria has moderate supplies of oil. Nothing like you have in Iraq, but moderate supplies. But the roads that go up the border right there between Syria and Iraq head into Turkey, and they're right on the Syria-Iraq border. Well, it seemed that ISIS was running trucks, and those trucks were going into Turkey. Now, here's the problem. These highways had been built, and they're just over the Syrian border into Iraq by Saddam Hussein. And one thing you had to say about Saddam Hussein, the guy knew how to build roads, just like the Romans.
I think the Germans used to do pretty good at that too, didn't they?
Yeah. But we're talking 4- and 6-lane roads.
Uh-huh.
So we're saying that not only was there a bit of a brisk truck traffic, but in actuality, the truck traffic taking oil, and these were oil tanker trucks,
Right.
from Iraq and from Syria into Turkey,
Oh, we used to watch them in the videos, remember?
was bumper to bumper,
Yes. 6 wide.
6 wide, 200 miles long,
Yeah.
and was more visible from the surface of the moon
That's right.
than the Great Wall of China.
That's true. Oh, my
Now-
God.
Now,
And that was Erdogan's son was heavily involved with that.
yeah. Now, when we checked on
Whoop,
who
I
owned
shouldn't
the
say that.
trucks-
I don't want you to lose your bureau. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, now that they're threatening me, I had to remind them that, it was 2 weeks ago when you arrested my bureau chief in Istanbul, dragged her into a police station, left her handcuffed, sitting in a chair for 16 hours, mind you, and then eventually took her to an airport, put her on a plane, and sent her out to Beirut. And the point being that it's a little late to threaten me now about pointing these things out. Now, what I tried to do, since I had a bureau there, I'd said, what the heck? We'd pointed out all these nasty things about Erdogan. He's cut a deal with the Russians. He had pretty much stopped aiding the Saudis and Qatar for the most part in their chemical attacks on Syria.
Uh-huh.
And I mean by the most part, meaning that he was only involved periodically in chemical attacks on Syria rather than all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
So this is me being morally flexible. So if you're only gassing civilians part of the time, I can approve of you and actually kind of like what you like. I'm a Trump supporter. You know, I mean, if you aren't visibly raping and killing a 12-year-old all the time, it means that part of the time you're a pretty nice guy. It's
I like that logic. That's
Yeah.
damn good logic. I'm going to remember that. That's very good.
It's like kind of lawyer logic. You know, what do you call 5,000 lawyers at the bottom of the,
you said it.
A good start. Yeah. It's that sort of thing. So I was increasingly developing because here's what I'd figured. The Russians are playing with this guy, and he's yelling at the Israelis again, and there's always a reason to want to yell at the Israelis. Now, why not yell at the Israelis? Israel's a country with, really, it's got about 14 million people in it. A little over half of them are Palestinians. They live in concentration camps. And what other country would use American chemical weapons and American jet planes and actually bomb concentration camps inside their own country?
Very clever.
Now, the Germans had the decency that when they opened concentration camps, they'd actually let guards run around and hit people with sticks and apparently make people take off their clothes and dance in circles if movies are to be believed. But
in the digital age, Gordon, I'm sorry. You can't believe much anything.
Hey, and I will tell you that the German concentration camps during the 30s and World War II contained fewer people than the ones the Israelis run. And you would have thought, I mean, Germany controlled all of Europe. Hell, they were 600-700 miles into Russia. They had, enslaved supposedly, 200 million people. Israel is about the size of New Jersey. It's even smaller than New Jersey. Where the hell do they get locking that many people up? Now, it's one thing locking people up. It's another thing locking people up and then flying over them with F-15s. And it's not even that. It even gets better. Years ago, Boeing, and now Boeing's an aircraft company out of the state of Washington.
No, you had it right the first time. It's an aircraft country. Might as well be.
It's like a country anyway.
Yeah.
It's more of a state. They used to actually have their own senator. For those, it's an old political joke, but we had a senator named Scoop Jackson, and
yes.
he was famous as being
Scoop Boeing Jackson.
Scoop Boeing Jackson, like what's the one we had here that ran for president? That other senator that was the senator from Archer Daniels Midland Corporation. Monsanto's got at least one senator of their own, if not a couple.
Yeah, right.
There's a coal company in Wyoming that actually has 2 United States senators of their own. I mean, I don't even have one United States senator. Not even one.
Nor I.
No.
Nor most of America.
Yeah. Well, you're not a coal company. Anyway, back to the Boeing story. Boeing had decided that they were going to protect the world from Iranian nuclear missiles that were going to rain down on Washington. Now, that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, that's one problem. That their missiles will only fly pretty much as far as Israel, which isn't a big threat to the United States. And for what some of us know, hardly a threat to anyone at all, but that's a matter of opinion. That's another point. But Boeing decided they'd develop a weapon system, and I'll tell you how it worked. Boeing had lots and lots of extra 747 aircraft. And what they decided to do was to build inside them, and this is like the Val Kilmer film, and I've mentioned this twice before on the show.
Yes.
Real Genius, and for any of you who haven't seen it, you need to see Real Genius to understand what I'm talking about. Well, inside these 747s, filling the entire plane from tail to the front, were huge chemical lasers that weighed hundreds of tons. Filled the entire plane. They could barely get off the ground. And what this thing would do theoretically is they would keep these Boeing 747s, fleets of them.
Oh, up in the
with
air,
these giant
25 hours a day.
200-yard long or 200-foot long giant chemical lasers would fly around Iraq 25 hours a day, not 24 like we used to do with
Right.
our fail-safe B-52s, in case the Iranians fired a missile aimed at Washington. And I know all of you folks listening at home are thinking, my God, if a nuclear missile hit Washington and killed all those assholes there, what would we do? You know, I'm thinking about it.
What would we do?
I'm thinking, I wake up in the morning. I'm really thinking about this. I'm waking up in the morning and it says, Trump, Congress, the Supreme Court, whores, lobbyists, the Pentagon's gone. All of it's gone.
The only loss would be the Smithsonian.
Yeah, pretty much that. And I'd get past that. I get the magazine. I'd still read the magazines.
Right.
And we'd all wake up in the morning, and I can tell you these things would happen. The first thing, the stock markets would go up 20,000 points. that's the first thing.
That's funny.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next thing, people pretty much drive to work, you know, and the next day, you know, they pretty much drive to work again. And then the next day, they pretty much drive to work again. And then people start asking themselves, what exactly did those people in Washington do?
I think you've pretty well got it nailed, Gordy.
And now that they're all gone, murdered by those Iranian nuclear weapons, what are the rest of us going to do? And
pretty much get up and go to work, I think.
Yeah, but do it with, well, one hell of a lot more money than we used to have. Because as it turns out, the people in that town, all they do is take, in varying degrees, and cyclically I can show you pretty much exactly how they do this, about 45% of everything you put on a plate to eat, they take everything you buy, 45% of the cost goes to pay one of those people. 45% of everything. So suddenly, you're going to find an embarrassing excess of money, where the next decision you're going to have to make, and it's going to be upsetting.
Well, we would have to assume, Gordy, that the loss of Washington, D.C. and the executive, judicial, and congressional branches wouldn't automatically negate the $22 trillion in debt that they've run up? Or who would... Does that come on us? We wouldn't have to pay that, would we?
Well, you know, the thing I'm suspecting here, and this is kind of related to an odd story. We're gonna jump back to these Boeing planes in a bit, and it's not that important. But
this is a Scoop Jackson hour.
Yeah, I was in it's 2014, and I was in Damascus, Syria. Now, I was there with a delegation. I was, among other things, I was with, it's a security conference, so I had members of the foreign ministries of most of the Arab nations. Israel wasn't there, but if they were, I like talking to the Israelis. We talked delicatessen, we talked bar mitzvahs. We always ate. A lot of courtesy, fun people. And and I would have wanted them to be there. Also was a delegation from Russia. And what I didn't realize is there was one young guy from Russia, kind of a big, I won't say chunky, because, you know, I'm talking to Americans here, and with the exception of Jeff and me for the last maybe 4 years, Americans are pretty chunky people. But this is kind of a chunky young guy.
Geez, I was out yesterday, Gordy, and you're right. I honest to God, I saw about 6 or 8 Americans, and they were all at least 40 to 50, 60 pounds overweight. I think if there were an earthquake and they were knocked off their feet, they would roll down the street.
And this is not meant as an issue of cruelty here.
No.
I know we're not, and we're not saying this like this. I mean, what we're going to say, and we'll take a little minute here, because Jeff is a big advocate of health oriented things.
I just don't want to die too young. I'm trying to eat right. That's all. And you are what you eat, and you are what you think.
What I'm telling you out there is, other than listening to us, and I'm saying listen to Jeff and deal with Jeff's sponsors. Other than that, start eating fresh foods, give up carbohydrates, give up all processed foods, give up eating food as a hobby, stop eating to get full.
No more of this comfort food crap either, huh? All right.
No.
I'm depressed.
Food.
I'm stressed. I'm anxious. Yeah. I need comfort food. Oh man.
Find yourself somewhere to walk. Do at least 2 miles a day if you can. If you can't, do everything you can, but make sure until you're at something resembling an optimal weight, make sure that you are, and you know how to do this, make sure that you're burning more calories than you're taking in. And I'm saying, write it all down. Put your life under control.
It's not hard to do. Gordy's right. If you write down what you consume in a day, each day for a week,
everything.
And you look back, everything, and you look back at it after a week, I think most of you would be appalled. Really.
With a sign on the refrigerator that says, "Do not open me." Simple as that. And if it means you're on steamed vegetables or fish or whatever, small amounts of brown rice, fine. But food is not a form of entertainment. It's taking 20 years out of your life. The other thing would be cigarettes. During the day, run the heart rate up. If it's hours of sex,
Come back.
So be it. We're plugging our headset back in here. If it's hours of sex with a responsible adult of some kind,
did you say hours as in plural?
Hey, some of these folks out here are running on better drugs than the rest of us are.
Oh, those things. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but in the process, do this. Get control of your life before anything else. Get healthy. Stay away from too much news. Don't open the emails. Get off the devices. Get off Facebook. Stop texting people. Go and see people. But get your life under control. And it's what we do at VT, and that's Veterans Today. Absolutely everyone at VT is on a diet and exercise program. We've got 150 people. I've got about 20 smokers still. I make their lives a living.
That's a lot of smokers.
Oh, I know. Get foreigners. Some of our folks over in Eastern Europe, some of our folks in Asia in particular are
right. Well, they start smoking when they're 8 and 9 over there.
Yeah. But anyway, back to this 2014. The young gentleman with me had I'm thinking he was in his 20s. I had no idea who he was. He had a young lady with him who was very bright, very attractive, and was, pretty much pulling him around by the short hairs. We noticed that. And anyway, at the end of the conference, and he was the Russian representative, there was nowhere for him to sit to make the final conference closing statements for the Russian delegation. So being the nice guy I was, and the kiss ass I am as well, I put up an extra table. I made sure they had a little sign. I took him out of the audience, walked him up, and I sat him down next to me. And then on camera in Russia, I shook his hands, put my arms on his little shoulders there, those things. Not knowing the guy was worth $40 billion. Well, I found his name the other day, And he is, other than mentioning who he is, he's a famous Russian monarchist. He is trying to bring back the Romanov family.
Yeah, interesting.
He's trying to replace their government as it is with a monarchy. And of course, my first sort of thing here, I'm thinking, the Romanovs, there was a lot of stuff of course, then I remembered, but when the Romanovs left, first of all, things had started getting quite a bit better during the last few years of the Romanovs. And then when the Romanovs finally left, things went totally to shit, But this was his point, basically. He believes in monarchy because democracy is total crap. Now, what does he mean by this? And this is a simple point. When you had little towns, and you had Louis down the street, who you've known all your life, and he wants to represent a group of people. And first of all, as a kid, he didn't steal your bike, and he turned in his homework, and you saw him shoveling people's walks. You know who this person is. And so you've got an idea where he came from, how he grew up, what he's like, you know his family, you know his values. Louis you can vote for. Well, in the world as it is today, and the worst part of the world when it comes to this kind of chicanery is the United States, we're not voting for people at all. We're voting for products. Where do candidates come from? Well, you ask yourself, I'm not somebody that hates Bill Clinton. I just wrote a paper on Ross Perot and the 1988 election, a very strange time in history when, and this is suppressed from Google, from history, which is the same thing, from news, and Google, which is the same thing, from human memory, and Google, which is the same thing, from consciousness, and Google, which is the same thing, if you hear what I'm also not saying. But if we looked at, we'll say, August in 1988, we had a 3-candidate race. Ross Perot had sworn to, and this is the guy that knows how to do it, a guy who'd actually made $5 billion of his own money to erase the Federal Reserve System. And that's something we're always harping about, this $20+ trillion that Jeff's talking about that we're paying interest on, that's owed to a series of banks owned by Sephardic Jewish families. And there's a federal law against mentioning the names of those families or why we're in the Federal Reserve System, or why, even though it's unconstitutional, 45% of the food off every plate that you don't get to eat goes to 5 mob families that were thrown out of Portugal and Spain in 1492 and laundered themselves into the United States first through Italy and Germany and Britain and Netherlands, and became the people that own all of your banks. And when you see the families, the names like, it's not just Rothschild. When you think of J.P. Morgan or the Harrimans or the Rockefellers or the Bushes, for instance, the Chases, the Mellon Scafes, or the secondary group of scum suckers like Adelson and the Koch brothers, all of them are part of this network that, through maybe a misnomer or maybe not, maybe it should have always been called the Deep State. But what is it? It's a group of people who were in 1100 AD thrown out of Britain for stealing everything they could get their hands on, thrown out of Spain. Italy was not organized in any way. They created a bandit empire in the cities of Bologna, Genoa, and Venice. And then, since Germany was yet to be a nation until 1870, they wandered into Germany and renamed themselves Rothschild and Bauer and Warburg and things like this, Loeb and Kuhn, and fake names that they never had anything to do with, renamed themselves. In the late 1600s, they dragged themselves back into Britain, invented the Bank of England, in the U.S. in 1787, and I'm rerunning some territory through their agent and scum-sucking spy Alexander Hamilton.
Boy, he was a greaseball.
Overthrew
people
the Articles of Confederation and created a government where states like Wyoming get 2 senators, and where there's an electoral college and a Supreme Court. And what do? Well, the Senate and the Supreme Court are and always have been the direct representatives in the United States of the ruling European, and calling them European is perhaps a misnomer, but the ruling families that run the Federal Reserve, that ran the Holy Roman Empire, that ran Britain into the ground, the ones who invented slavery, who traded the opium, the ones who started every war we've had for 400 years, the same people. And now Donald Trump calls them the deep state. Now, whether,
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, whether any of this stuff, yeah, and it's true. Well, this guy, and we're back to December 2014, and this guy I'd met, this kid couldn't speak any English. I'm thinking he's 28. No idea that he owned all the aluminum smelters and owned just thousands of gas wells. Not a clue about any of this. Although he had a cute girlfriend, mind you. But the whole idea is that democracy as we know it, representative democracy, is an utter scam. And that every 2 years or every 4 years, since we have midterm elections coming up and others, a mob of people none of us know are going to be packaged and presented to us. So whether it's Elizabeth Warren, who's being given a bow and arrow and a couple of eagle feathers.
God. Yeah.
Or the pack of others, all of them are going to be plucked together, sent to Washington, that city that I personally, out of my own demented sort of way, pray that an Iranian nuclear missile might just someday incinerate during the, at a time when I'm not there, and I wish we could do a 9/11 thing where we could send a text message to all of the good people in Washington.
That's right. That's right.
That's both of them.
To
get out of town, as though they were the special people who were.
How many were? Yes, 4,000. How many? I don't remember. It was some huge number. Yeah. They just didn't show up for work that day. I'll be damned. It's the biggest.
9/11 was the biggest sick out in history.
Yes, indeed.
Of investment counselors and certified public accountants and whatever, who all developed a magic form of influenza.
They got the stomach flu. They just couldn't get out of bed. It just hit them.
It's like they had all gotten a hold of the same bad corned beef sandwich, which is at one time, or somehow they'd all had just a chunk of the world's worst matzo ball. But as to who these people were or what ethnicity or whatever, that's something else. But the idea here, we sit here sometimes, and my tendency is to want to look for some kind of sensibility within the political system. And then I go through my life. Now, Jeff and I are politically, I come out of mainstream Democratic Party. It wasn't until in 1986 I was recruited into the Republican National Committee. I've been an RNC member for 32 years. Prior to that, my first Democratic election I worked was 1956 when I worked for Adlai Stevenson. And yes, I was 8 years old, and walked door to door. I worked in pretty much every election.
At the age of 8, even to be able to pronounce Adlai is pretty good. Pretty good.
Well, what I couldn't pronounce was Estes Kefauver. That was the one. That's the one I had trouble with. But as I go through my life here, these are the things I keep. Every time I think the gods are smiling on me, throwing a bone my direction. And for the few of us here that are wheeling around here, some of us are still getting around. I'm doing it on, a dozen anti-inflammatories and an increasing number of artificially repaired joints. But John Kennedy, and you'll never remember, but it was the feeling of weight being lifted off us. It's one thing listening to a press conference, the kind of things we have here. It's quite something else listening to John Kennedy. The best day that Jeff and I have on the radio, Kennedy made us look bad. It was a joy to have someone stand up there who you absolutely knew would go to the Pentagon and just put his boot up people's asses without a second's thought. The steel companies, the banks, any of them, stick it where the sun doesn't shine. And of course, we know exactly what happened to him. Then behind this, and this is one Jeff may not know as much about as I do, because I come out of Labor Party politics, and then we're presented Bobby Kennedy. It's 1968. That's the last election I worked on for a bit, because as that election, I left for Vietnam just not long after that election.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But for those of us that remember, those of us that were involved, Bobby Kennedy, and this is what would we have seen here if Bobby Kennedy were not murdered? And we only recently have identified the people behind the Kennedy murders. And in particular, it was a young billionaire psychopath named Richard Mellon Scafie that we are tracking down to having a personal war. And his personnel and his money are showing up behind not just JFK, RFK, but John Jr. as well. Now, he died a couple years ago, owned a couple of newspapers, but it was a man obsessed with Richard Nixon, and an absolute lunatic. And one of the things that led us to Scafie and his ties to the killings, particularly of John Jr. and RFK, is we wanted to see where Brett Kavanaugh, our new Supreme Court justice, came from. Who financed him? Who put him in the public eye?
Huh.
And he was groomed out of that special sewage department in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, run by, and just write down the name here, and all of you take a look at it, Richard Mellon Scafie. And the Mellons, of course, by Mellon, we're talking the Mellon banking family of the Mellons, and the Chases, and who were, of course, agents of the Warburgs and the Coons, the Stepin Fetchits, for that same group of deep state. And this is the highest rung we can find, taking back 500 years, who have destroyed not just every nation they touched. These are the inventors of colonialism. These are the inventors of world wars. These are the people who invented communism. Their invention.
Essentially, it could be said that they did have a very firm hand in the invention of modern suffering.
This is a story here, and I think we've covered the Russian friend enough. I've got a friend who is a member of a UFO study group that's run by. It's a governmental organization from, let's say, we'll call it the underground version of something a little larger than NATO, but a little smaller than the UN. It's a group of about 24 nations that study potential threats from off-world civilizations. which I'll say absolutely exist and interact with us all the time and have had a strong hand in our civilization. And here's what my friend tells me basically about one of these families, and this is the Rothschilds.
Uh-huh.
The individual who's a good friend of mine was also a friend of Nathan Rothschild's. And what is it with these people? I mean, you hear the name all the time, and then there are these people who just want to harp about how much they hate Jewish people. And by the way, I'm telling you that that's not a good thing to do. By religion, race, anything, if you find yourself doing it, there may be certain Jewish families or groups or organizations or of other ethnicities you're allowed to hate for specific reasons. But when you find a kid somewhere and you're going to hate that kid because of where he was born, who his parents were, it means your life is pretty much off track. You need to step back and re-examine how other people have programmed you. And if you feel that way, chances are you feel that way because someone else programmed you to feel that way because they wanted you to. And chances are it's one of these people who did it through their control of newspapers and television.
How about just shorten it up? Their control of everything.
Everything. Well, anyway, my friend was telling me that
Did you know, by the way, if you just joined us, we are listening to Campfire Stories with Uncle Gordy. Richard Mellon Scafee was born on July the 3rd, 1932. He died on July the 4th, the 4th of July, 2014. How patriotic.
Well, it was certainly a good day for the United States. And I can't say
That's where all the
say
fireworks
much more.
were. Yeah.
And it is as close as you would find. I found it impressive that, well, first of all, I'm not convinced he's really dead, but if things like that, and I won't call it a human being, if things like that can actually die, and that he wasn't secretly transformed into something else, if they actually die, I mean, that's a pretty good sign. Anyway, back to this Nathan Rockefeller story. Nathan Rockefeller's 25th birthday was at the family estate on the island of Corfu. Corfu is an island off the coast of Greece near the border with Albania. I never go there, but I take the ferry from Ancona in Italy over to Greece periodically, and you sail right past Corfu, and I keep thinking, I'm going to go there sometime, and I never make it. But on the island of Corfu, on his 25th birthday, and this is, by the way, in a scene deeply paralleled in the TV series The Exorcist that Fox ran for 2 seasons and canceled, there was a ceremony where Nathan Rothschild, and I'm using those names interchangeably for some reason, where during this ceremony, a demonic presence, and I was told there are no such things as demons. I'm calling it a demon.
Sorry, there are.
A non-corporeal entity that had been inhabiting this planet for over 100,000 years had, at the request of Nathan himself, moved inside his body to aid him during his lifetime, to share his life. And all Nathan had to do to feed and gain the strength and insights and protections, including the guarantee of an afterlife of his choice, that he would never really die. Not in a sense the rest of us do. Right. All he had to do the rest of his life is to do things that caused humanity to feel as much pain and loss and agony as possible.
Suffer. I told you.
Now, when this was told to me by an official who was there, and I'm saying, sounds like demons, sounds like evil, he's saying, no, this is a non-corporeal entity, off-world non-corporeal entity. They've been here forever, and they are part of certain key families that would be the deep state families. They inhabit their bodies, and they live on negative vibrations, and then the vibrations we're called negative.
They feed on it.
They feed on suffering, and we're also, coming into Gene Roddenberry. In 1967, Star Trek ran an episode that deeply paralleled this as well. Now, when I thought about this, and of course, we look at so many things, the ideas of demonic possession. We'll often talk about Malachi Martin. And for those of you unfamiliar with Malachi Martin, on YouTube you will find 3 very long Art Bell. And this is one of the great precursors to what we're doing today. Is Art Bell still around, by the way, Jeff?
Not on this dimension, no.
Not in this. Well, Art Bell did 3 rather
He checked
long
out on Friday the 13th, by the way.
Now, did you have Malachi Martin on at some time yourself?
I did not. I was well aware of him, but there was an issue. He was a regular on that other program, and when that was the case, guests often found that they were told that they shouldn't come over on this program. Go ahead.
Well, Martin will explain the mechanics, and this is a Jesuit, former Vatican Secretary of State, an Irish priest who had worked at the Vatican for some years, who swears that the Catholic Church had been destroyed by a group of Jesuits possessed by demonic demonic creatures that led the church to people itself with pedophiles and Satan worshipers. And of course, he said this many, many years ago and put this in a book he had written called Windswept House, a New York Times bestseller from many decades ago, predicting that the church was going to be embarrassed by ending up with tens of thousands of satanic pedophile priests. And lo and behold, one of those curiosities. But the interviews are still around. Google Corporation has not seen fit as yet to suppress them. Back to where we were, this idea of democracy, and this is. And I've been talking to people recently since the owner of Amazon Corporation and the Washington Post and the
you mean the richest man in the world, that guy? Yeah,
the gazillionaire Jeff Bezos, who runs and I will call it the fake news site, The Intercept, and I don't think Jeff knows that anyway, but he's out shopping for presidential candidates, and the people he's shopped for, apparently he's mentioned that, of course, I haven't seen any money from this, but that for whatever pair that he's going to groom here, that he wants me to be an advisor behind this group of people somehow. And then, of course, the people I know that he's currently involved in vetting toward throwing $50 or $60 billion at are, for the most part, as soulless as anyone else is. And I keep thinking, I sat through the death of Bobby Kennedy, and for those of us, and we're going back, 20 minutes ago in our discussion, and how heartbreaking that was, because we could feel who he was as a person.
Right.
And it was something.
Yeah.
The replacement behind this was a political animal, and that political animal was Hubert Humphrey. Now, the current, and we'll call it the adjusted smear campaign about Humphrey, is that Humphrey was a warmonger and rightist hiding with the Democrats. In actuality, Hubert Humphrey is the author of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The Civil Rights Act saved Social Security 3 times, is responsible for the creation of Medicare, and created the programs that for the decade that I'm part of sent the children, and including me, of America's poor working class to university without a lot of debt.
He's got a bad rap. We're over time, Gordy, so you got to wrap it up in about a minute here.
Well, as we go to election by election, as real people popped up, they had to get rid of Humphrey by throwing in George Wallace and splitting the election to put Tricky Dick Nixon in. And then when Wallace turned out to be a little more real than anyone wanted him to be, then they gunned down Wallace. And then we had 58 days in office. We had Ronald Reagan. And lo and behold, a family friend of the Bush family puts 5 rounds in Ronald Reagan as well. Now, I can name a dozen presidential candidates or presidents or people who would have changed everything. But the big one, 1988, Ross Perot, the Soviet Union was collapsing.
Right.
And Perot would have handled it all differently, disarmed the U.S., killed the Federal Reserve, and we would have had decade after decade of peace. It would have been a different world.
No money in peace.
Why did he withdraw? He was 20 points ahead in the polls, 20, when he suddenly walked away. And he has been erased from the history books.
I never seen again. He's gone. Absolutely gone.
Alive and 88 years old, but off the planet to the rest of us, no longer seen.
Gone. Very well said. There's a lot of history in that hour. I hope many of you will listen to this again. It's very important to understand where we are, and it's impossible to do so if you look at the TV. It isn't going to happen. So thank you, Gordy. That was superb, as usual.
These hours are getting shorter and shorter.
Yeah, they are. They are. We'll talk to you Thursday with Ian. Will be here as well.
We'll look forward to it.
All right. You take care. Thanks. All right. Gordon Duff, the editor of Veterans Today, and we'll be right back.